We'll get started. Welcome to tonight's webinar, Agency Matters. My name's Leonie Goodwin and I work at Sea Change, an Oslo-based purpose-driven organisation engaging people in sustainability transformations. We're really delighted that so many people could join for this, our second webinar in the You Matter More Than You Think webinar series. Each of these webinars will address a particular chapter or topic from Karen O'Brien's new book, You Matter More Than You Think, Quantum Social Change in Response to a World in Crisis. Tonight's topic is agency, and it's important and timely as we're facing multiple ongoing crises in the world. In our work, we focus on climate change and sustainability, and nearly every day we're reading about the impacts of a changing climate around the planet. From unprecedented floods in Bangladesh, the collapse of Canada's last fully intact ice sheet, record high temperatures and fires in Siberia, and a heat wave in the UK and parts of Europe at the moment. So the word agency, as we're using it here tonight, refers to the capacity of a person or group to act in a given environment or situation. So what can reflecting on agency give us when it comes to addressing the challenges of climate change and sustainability? And how might concepts from quantum social change help us activate agency? So we've gathered a really exciting group of speakers here tonight to explore and inspire you and maybe get you thinking about agency in new ways. But first, just some practical things. Could everyone please mute themselves when they're not talking? And in terms of the flow of the webinar, we'll be having presentations from our guests first. That will be followed by a discussion in plenary, and then we'll be breaking into smaller breakout groups to discuss 2 questions for around 10 minutes. But we'll also be taking questions throughout the webinar, so please use the chat function to post questions, which I'll be asking at various points throughout the webinar tonight. Also, finally, this webinar is being recorded and we'll send a link out to download it after the call. So now to introduce Karen. Karen O'Brien is a Professor of Human Geography at the University of Oslo in Norway and co-founder of Sea Change. She's a gifted writer and speaker and is passionate about engaging and inspiring people to generate equitable and sustainable transformations. Thanks, Karen.
Great, thank you, Leonie, and thank you everyone for joining on the call tonight. It's really exciting to see everybody's faces, and now I'm going to not see everybody's faces and share my screen. And let's see, share. And I want to just give a little bit of an overview of agency as I approach it from the quantum perspective. And I want to, let's see, can you all see that? Leonie, can you see it? Yeah, okay. I want to talk about why agency matters and why it actually matters more than you think. And just to kind of frame the discussion today, for those of you who didn't take part in the first webinar back in June, this is part of a book manuscript that I've made available back in June called You Matter More Than You Think. And it really is an effort to start to interrogate what quantum social science has to offer for our ways about thinking about social transformations, because we know that we have to transform at a rate, scale, speed, and depth that is unprecedented in history. And the question is how. What is the how of transformation? And so in tonight's webinar, we're going to really talk about agency, which is defined, as Leonie pointed out, as action or intervention producing a particular effect. And its origin is from the medieval Latin word agentia, or from agent or doing. And one of the interesting things about agency is that it doesn't really translate into all languages very well. And we struggle, for example, in Norwegian to find what is that right word for agency. And agency has this idea of this doing and action, but it also has a quality that we'll talk about a lot too. That is because it's actually agency that has led to many of the problems that we've created in the world today. So how do we actually, have a different type of agency to create a sustainable, equitable, and thriving world? So in the book, I kind of draw on different interpretations of quantum physics and different insights from quantum social science, including agential realism. And agential realism is Karen Barad's idea based on it's a very relational interpretation of quantum theory that really draws on the inseparability of objects and subjects. And she recognizes humans as agencies of observations that participate with nature and that are constitutive of reality. So she says agency is a matter of intra-acting rather than interacting as separates. And it's an enactment, not something that someone or something has. Agency cannot be designated as an attribute of subjects or objects. Agency is a matter of making iterative changes to particular practices through the dynamics of interactivity. And I think this idea of agential realism, that we are constantly like participating in the world, it's also very consistent with quantum Bayesianism, or what we call known as cubism, and the idea that goes back to theoretical physicist Archibald Wheeler, who is talking about the idea of a participatory universe. And in cubism, Hans Christian von Steyr says, rather than acting as mere recorders of information, we are agents who participate in the very creation of the outcomes of our interactions with the world. And Wheeler's student, Chris Fuchs, is quoted in the book saying, with the action of the agent upon the system, something new comes into the world that wasn't previously there. And he goes on to cite Wheeler, who was his advisor, saying, each elementary quantum phenomena is an elementary act of fact creation. And so this kind of draws in this idea that we are part of the systems that we're trying to change, which is very much, the idea of the Anthropocene and everything. But we can take this further, and in Quantum Mind and Social Science, Alex Wendt talks about will, and will as being the essence of agency, a power to animate and move the body and the mind in the form of attention, from essentially a passive stance of cognition to an active, purposeful engagement with the world. And he goes on to explore in the book chapters the problem of like mental causation, or how we go from like just states of mind here into actions in the world. And he looks at them from both classical and quantum perspectives, and then makes all kind of ideas about what that actually means to look at it from a quantum point of view. And importantly, he brings in this idea of consciousness. And he says, will can become conscious in the form of an explicit intention in organisms that can project themselves self-consciously into alternative futures. And this is a mouthful here, but by maintaining a conscious intention through repeated acts of will, agents enforce correlations backwards on their behavior over time, which gives it coherence, and not just the sense that it is consistent with the past, but he's actually saying that in the teleological sense that the future gives meaning to and completes the past. So I think in the next webinar, we'll be talking about this idea of time and backwards causation and everything. But the point here is that through our agency and through the way we envision the future, how we do that, it actually influences right here and right now and in the next moment, in the next moment. So that's kind of that where I'm coming from in the why agency matters. And I really appreciate all the comments and feedback that I've gotten, and including like familiarity with this idea of effective agency, which I think is important to bring into this discussion, because effect is the capacity of any body for activity and responsiveness, and it's considered a basis for agency and the power of acting. And the idea of effective agency refers to the encounters of the bodies in the world that shape or mobilize the capacity to act, says Susan McManus. And very much aligned with quantum physics, but it's not, she doesn't bring that in. She says effective agency has a creative role in radical agency, shaping an anticipatory orientation that points to possibilities beyond those authorized by the present. And so what she's actually saying is that there's something about that quality of agency that actually kind of goes between the idea of like structures and agents as two separate things. And so the little effective agency, when I saw this picture, like I have my little Zapatista doll from my research in Chiapas days, and I thought, yes, I need to actually get effective agency into, our understanding of how we individually and collectively are affecting the future and create this so-called quantum leap. And that brings me to my final slide on how meetings matter. And going back to Karen Barad, she has a beautiful quote in the book that is really related to the title, called Meeting the Universe Halfway. She says, we have to meet the universe halfway to move toward what may come to be in ways that are accountable for our parts in the world's differential becoming. All real living is meeting, and each meeting matters. And I want to just use that as a little segue into introducing our guests tonight, Monica Sharma and Indra Adnan, because I met both of them, and they really, it was a meeting with both of them. They were meetings that mattered, and they've influenced the way I look at agency. And in fact, Monica was the one that in an earlier draft, she goes, you need a chapter on agency, Karen. And so that's one of the reasons it's here. And so I'll first introduce Monica, and she'll talk for 10 minutes, and then I'll introduce Indra, and then we'll have a little bit of a discussion and dialogue with questions that you might be putting in the chat room. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and let me just get the end of the slideshow. See how this goes. Let me see. Leonie, I end it for you? Yeah, you could end it for me. I'm really excited to teach next week on Zoom. Monica Sharma, Dr. Monica Sharma is a renowned leadership expert and practitioner coach, and also a medical doctor with decades of experience in how to effectively scale change. And that's one of the reasons I contacted her, because she was talking about, from personal to planetary transformation. And so, we've been working together for more than 10 years, and she's currently leading an international constellation to build leaders at all scales and all over the world to promote this conscious full spectrum approach to addressing the goals of the sustainable development goals, and many of the interacting complex problems we're facing with. So Monica, welcome, and we'd love to hear what agency means to you.
Thank you so much, Karen. The first thing is that your book matters, because you talk of agency matters. And I think it is this invitation that you've posed in your book and otherwise about inquiry. And so for me, agency is about inquiry, insight, practice. It's not about understanding ideological stances. It's just a space of emergence. And I'll share a few examples. And so to me, agency is what I have seen on the ground. And you pose a very accurate question in the beginning of your book. And you say, quantum social change is a potential that can yield fantastic results for humanity and the planet. It can also be abused. And I look at this as every instrument that we have. And so to me, very skillfully somewhere, you underpin that thought. You ask us, how are you going to use the space? And you underpin it with, there is a longing, you write, for equity, dignity, and compassion. So you and I think the same way. I think most people listening to this will think the same way. So agency for me is unfolding my inner capacity and actually creating structural systems, cultural shifts. That's where I work. And that's the conscious full spectrum pieces is connecting to my values and my ability to not be stuck to my opinions, to be not like I need to go from one to the other depending on where the wind blows, but to unfold. And so for me, whether it's mindfulness practice, whether it is quantum social change, unless we are willing to be in this space of longing to connect with my essence, we're going to mess it up because we are human and we all have egos. So, I mean, that's not news. I mean, everybody knows that. So the book invites us to transcend that space. I want to bring that in. So I'll give you an example, and I'll give you examples from different parts of the world. And maybe I will begin from Ethiopia. And, you know, there was this, all our work that we do is a conscious full spectrum approach, which means we stand in our innate values. We then look at what we want to shift, if we want to shift it. No prescription. And then we do something. So here is this woman. She doesn't have 5 PhDs. In fact, she is a citizen. So we will always have a multi-sector, multi-level engagement. And in many places during the HIV/AIDS epidemic, we had the property of the woman, because of cultural practices, if her husband died, went to the husband's side of the family, and she was left with nothing. Because, you know, that's culture, very much like not a positive side. The laws may be different, but the culture doesn't shift. And she steps up one day, and I think it was day 3, and she said, you know, I stand for equality. Last night I told my husband, it's not equal that we take the property of our sister-in-law because it's culture. I've called her up and I'm going to make a change. And so, of course, in the room of 100 people, everybody else says, but that's our culture. She says, if I don't move culture, who will? And then it becomes a collective movement. This ability for an individual to stand in who they are is what you called will. And what you presented, Karen, so eloquently always, what you called effective agency. Did you not say that? Effective agency, that I'm able to act. So then this is culture. I mean, it was very much the same process of agency when an imam stood up in Djibouti, actually, with all the people from Arab states that had, that he went and had a fatwa against female genital mutilation. Why? Because he can see a gap. He notices his own gap. It's a space of inquiry. It's not a space of preaching to anyone. And your book has that throughout, Karen. You invite us to explore. So for me, the foundation of quantum social change will be different if we do not commit to what you call our longing. The ability for me to stand firmly in who I am, with a space of fairness for all, dignity for all, and compassion. So let me go to these 3 words that you've used. So we have an innate sense of equity. And I was thrilled when I saw Oxfam's, you know, write-up on Even It Up, and they said 92% of Americans believe in equity. I'm not asking you to believe that. I'm saying they believe that, okay? So if I believe in fairness, and kids believe in fairness, right? Because you have 5 kids and you give a bigger slice of the cake to one and the other, they're not clapping for mom. I mean, they are like, oh, where's my share? So we have this innate sense. And when we develop it further, it's something that's wonderful. And it can underpin quantum social change. Then agency emerges. And then there is another aspect, and I learned this from Daniel Goleman's research, which is really every counselor on the planet knows, and now we are talking about mental health and well-being. And, oh, by the way, Leonie, let me know if I'm going over, okay? I have no problem being interrupted. So basically, he found, and we all know that the sense of self-worth is vital. When self-worth translates into social norms, it's dignity. It's not dishonorable honor. So we have honor killing, that's a hijacking of the word. And somebody in their question said, every word matters. Yes, every word matters, because if I call honor killing honorable, it's not. It's dishonorable murder based on some social norm that we have. So we've actually worked with that, you know, and we've seen how people unfold from who they are being. So it's the same thing, you know, you've brought up something in one of your chapters. You say everyone can contribute. This work is about everybody contributing, where it's not about this inner space of will attached to some knowledge I have since I studied, you know, I was a physician, epidemiologist, or you as a scientist, Karen. It's not the knowledge you and I have, or anybody else in the room has, or, you know, whether it's Indra or Anne or Leonie has. What it is who you are and what you're willing to stick your neck out for. And that's the space that everybody can contribute, you see. So for me, this is very important for us to move. You say, you write, and you speak about interdependence as different from independence or dependence. This space is a space of interdependence, and the mindset that exploits people, and for example, the movement around Black Lives Matter is about exploitation of a group. That mindset to need to have power over people, not my internal power to serve people, that exists in the world of climate change. So the mindset that dominates the planet as a resource to be used for me is the same as my mindset as everybody's a resource. What is the use of my relationship with somebody? And you write about relationships. It's got to be different. It's not a transactional space. It's a space of unfolding. And today, Karen, we have the templates and tools that we can use to make that happen. And so for me, the last piece that I would like to share here is a slide related to the paradigm between, you know, how the intersectionality of our dominating patterns. And to me, that's a very important piece to work with. So I will do a screen share, and I will.
We are getting a bit low on time, Monica, but yeah.
Okay.
It's okay. Go ahead. Just, yeah.
1 minute?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Thank you for letting me know, because I get so involved that I don't watch my timepiece. You see, the thing is, am I able to cultivate a mindset that is like this, or am I, so it's the mindset that leads to all of this. And I will go back to another slide to show you, and we will talk about that more when we have our conversation. Just to say that the intersectionality of what we do, whether it's racism, casteism, classism, anthropocentrism, or sexism, the need to dominate comes from the same space. So we cannot work on one ism, and the example I take is that do women in India fight for women's rights, as women do everywhere, Me Too movement? Do all those women sit with Dalit women in a village and eat? No. So ending one ism requires a post-privileged world for every ism. On that note, we will have more, Leonie, later. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Monica. And yeah, and I think your work has really inspired the book itself, so it's very much a reflection of our work together. And now I'd like to introduce Indra Adnan. And Indra is an advocate, writer, and psychosocial therapist, and also an organizational and international relations consultant. And I met her through the Lift Politics project, an Erasmus Plus project that I'm working on, that is looking at leadership in transition and really how do we create an alternative politics. And in 2017, Indra initiated something called the Alternative UK, which is a new political platform that's inspired by the Alternative Party in Denmark. And so I feel like the work she's doing really resonates with quantum social change in action. And people are always saying, I need examples. And so I mention Indra's work often in the book as an example of how this can actually play out in reality. So Indra, welcome.
Thanks very much. And it's really an incredible excitement for me to be on this call with you, Karen, but also with Monica, who I haven't seen for 15 years. We've crossed paths before, and there seems to be a moment when like minds or people yearning for the same thing move into the same space. I'm really excited about that. I'm going to share my screen. Let's hope I'm successful. And 1 second, just tidy that up. Well, it doesn't seem to want to go full screen, so there we are. So I hope that's visible for everybody the way it is for me. I just wanted to start off by giving you some sense of where I'm coming from, because I've had a long journey in my life, and I've only recently come to working in the political sphere. And from a very early age, I would say from my early teens, the big question has been for me, where and what is agency? And the reason for that was only personal. I faced a lot of deaths when I was young. My brother died in a car accident. All my 7 aunts and uncles died of cancer while I was in my teens. And I watched my mother and my father kind of slowly disappear from my life as authorities. And I wondered from a very early age, where does my power lie, and what is agency? And although that may sound strange, it's a word that came to me quite early in my seeking and my yearning. And so when I came across Karen only recently with that same question, I felt this was a moment really when it's going to become a great shared question and a political question. So my 3 modes of addressing the question of what is agency have been at these different realms as I describe them. One is at the international realm. I've operated as a soft power consultant. One is as what I call a systems architect, that is engaging with people who are developing what I would call the new system that makes the old one obsolete. And the third is, as Karen was describing, I've worked and studied as a psychotherapist. And there's a reason for those 3 different realms of operation. It's because I've always sensed that there's a connectivity, if you like, between the personal realm, the social realm, and the global realm. And that somewhere in there lies the mystery of where our agency lies. So all through that time, I've been working as a journalist and a writer. And that's important because one of the most important tools of developing agency is narrative and storytelling. And I'll come to that later. But just to begin now, to go back to the point where I started to think more concretely about power and politics. And you'll recognize this moment for the UK when it was only 5 days actually before the Brexit referendum, when one of our MPs was murdered by a fanatic from the opposition. And I'd already been part of a political think tank for over 10 years, thinking about how we could improve our politics. What was the essence of our politics that was dysfunctional? What this referendum proved, and our party politics proves, is that the way that we conceive of every power issue as binary, and that the way that our parties always work in an oppositional way really undoes our individual human agency, rather than allowing us ways to come together and to find and to use our imagination, our resources to find solutions. Our politics essentially divides us. And that is something that has become so fundamental to our powerlessness that at that moment I felt compelled actually to start the big question of, if politics is broken, what is the alternative? So one of the facts that is really unavoidable and must be taken into account, that across Europe, only 2% of people are members of political parties. And some people think that doesn't matter, but mostly the importance is that only 2% of people are creating the discourse, the narrative around where our power lies and what matters around our power. So how can we challenge that? So just to go straight to the solutions that we've come up with over these past 3 years, this is now what the alternative offers. 6 different ways into looking at power and agency, which I won't go into in detail here, but they evolve, as you can see, around narrative, around shaping the system, about ways of designing democracy, about sharing our learning, how we build an economy through that. And very important to us is, what is the feel of a new politics? What is the thing that would attract people to a different way of doing power together? So right at the beginning of the question, if politics is broken, what's the alternative, was the fundamental question: what is the concept of the human being right at the heart of our politics today? And if we if we think about the way that we discuss politics in our mainstream news, we're really thinking about human beings as homo economicus. They're material entities that need a roof over their heads and a tax cut and so on. That politics is always playing into the material needs of the human being and the material capabilities. But we know, each one of us, that a human being is a much more complex biopsychosocial spiritual entity. And if we're going to be able to use our resources, somehow that has to be brought into the political system. So my school of psychotherapy was one that was originated by 2 people, Joe Griffin and Ivan Terrell, called the Human Given School of Psychotherapy. And they really focused on this idea that we're driven by our essential emotional needs. So these emotional needs are not, they're not joy, grief, pain, anger, but the things that help us to become social beings. Our emotional needs show up as the very things that connect us to our society. So in order to thrive, we have to be connected. So as you can see, these 9 essential emotional needs: attention, status, belonging, autonomy, security, achievement, privacy, meaning and purpose, and intimacy, you'd recognize them very quickly as the things that drive us all the time. Through this, we become social beings. So why is it that we're not successful at releasing our agency in the public sphere? We do have the resources to be able to get these emotional needs met. These are all the different capacities that every human being is born with. You'll recognize them all. We can get our needs met if we have the conditions in which we can use all of these resources. However, most of us will understand this, that instead of having the conditions to use our own resources, our emotional needs are constantly being hijacked by advertising and by other means of making us addicted to a consumerist tendency. We are actually minute by minute being hijacked by a business model that keeps us addicted, if you like, to a growth economy. So we, instead of being able to use our own agency, we are constantly being harnessed for the agency and the intentions of a much smaller group of people that drive the growth economy and now responsible for the state of our planet. So the goal then for us as in creating a new politics, the aim, if you like, would be to move back into relationship, the holistic human being reconnected to our community and living lives that are healthy for the flourishing planet. Now I can see I'm already at my 10 minutes worth. If I could have I will just flash through these next couple of slides so that just to give people a sense of what we could ask questions about as well. So just to say that this is the narrative, the new narrative that we're trying to develop. And some of it is already present. What is already coming into our culture is ideas about relational welfare and relational politics. But this idea of ourselves as fractured could also give rise to a completely new narrative about our fractal possibilities, small patterns and groups of behavior that will take us to new ways of being powerful. We've actually been in a revolution for over 20 years. Our ways of being, our ability to integrate and to learn, our ways of being human are already appearing in the public space. But the question is, how do we see this and how do we talk about it? So our particular focus is the sense that we need new containers for this relationship and trust and ability to design. Here's our particular thing that we focus on, the building of citizens' action networks. And here, in a way, is what we believe is possible, that we're moving back into relationship and a new story of us. That's it. Thank you. I'm sorry that it was longer than intended, but I think I gave a good overview.
Yeah, no, that was excellent, Indra. Thank you so much. And I think we actually need a lot of time because, you know, that idea of fractals, that I bring that up in the Agency Matters section on, like, how do we scale change? And that's very common to Monica's too. So we could actually have a little discussion around that. But I was thinking that the whole fractal approach to scaling change is worthy of its own webinar, and that just getting to the heart of what is agency first is really like a good starting point. And Leonie is going to read any questions that might be coming in and everything. But before that, I want to just ask both of you a question, questions that came up in the last webinar that I think are almost at the heart of agency and social change in a very polarized world today. And we had, for example, Asun St. Clair asked about how we can overcome structural inequalities and their ideologies which limit people's capacities to exercise their rights and wishes to break free. So in other words, agency is actually being almost like just kept down, and that goes into, you know, Paulo Freire's idea of conscientization, etc. And Colleen Vogel asked, how do we deal with the tensions, conflict, and differentials of power that exist today in the political context? And Monica kind of touched on that toward the end, you know, with her slide and everything. So if you could just, both of you elaborate, that would be really great. And then Leonie will ask more questions.
Okay, I'll take a minute with that. You see, in the work that we do, we address what we call isms. And what happens is that participants, after they anchor themselves truly in who they are like 42 templates and tools, they then are able to see something. And I'll show you what they see. What they see is they can see that the conventional ways in which we address anything, and I'm trying to get to the previous slide, and I don't seem to be able to do a good job of that. So I then may have to do the Leonie kind of thing. So help me, Leonie kind of thing. So let me see if that works. I think it will. So, yes. Do you realize that it's that rigid mindset ideology that Indra referred to in her presentation? Was so beautiful, and it's that space that's based on domination more than we need, our survival, you know, our brainstem, our limbic system hijacks, exclusion, egoism, has many manifestations. and anthropocentrism is there, ableism is there. And for us, what we have attempted to do is to be able to go back and look at what can humans do with the tools and templates we have to shift from that mindset as an emergent process for self, not as a ideological stance, but more like who I am and therefore how I think. And so a simple example of conflict, and I will move from this place. So the conflict between, because you brought up Black Lives Matter in that space, the conflict between police and people. So this is practical sharing from California, Santa Cruz County, and how we use these tools. When we began, there were gangs and the young ones, youth, and there were police, and it was like an oppositional polarized space. How do you use tools that emerge from self to generate a new conversation that transcends polarity? Today, after 3 years, the police actually finance youth programs. The youth sit in the county council. They are more adept at complex planning tools than many adults are. So all I want to say is it's possible to break those patterns, provided there's a result we want and we acknowledge that this agency can be awakened in everybody. So I know we are running short of time, Karen. So over to you again.
So Indra, how would you answer those questions?
Yeah, I mean, I would concur with Monica that it starts with the sense that something is possible. I mean, for sure, the grand narrative around politics is that we are powerless, that ordinary citizens are powerless, that our leaders have to, in a sense, fight it out between them, and that all we really have to do is to vote for the right side. And then most of us are in a position of having to vote for, the left or the right. I mean, it's a constructed powerlessness. So for us, our sense was that to be able to experience again your power, you have to step outside the political system. And you have to move within your own community and claim back the right, if you like, to come together across that community that has been pre-divided by these structures and cultures that you were describing. It's not a small thing to do, but it's an act of rebellion, if you like, to say that we're going to come together as a community, we're going to meet, we're going to generate our own vision of what is possible. And then we may even start to build the alternative systems and solutions to our problems within our community. Now, for some people, that will sound another act of powerlessness, if you like, because it sounds like a small thing to do. What difference does it make if me and my city we're doing something different? But in this age of technology, all of these new prototypes or new patterns or ways of behaving together, these are the fractals that we're talking about. That as soon as they sort of gel with people, they become very attractive to others. When people can see passion and purpose and meaning in action, it becomes like an attractor, and it gets copied everywhere. So sometimes we see this as movements, for example, you'll see it as Extinction Rebellion, sort of spread across the globe because of its sheer attraction and confidence. When that is actually being used to build, for example, these citizens' action networks I described to you, or, a new economies that start from your local, that answer your food questions and your energy questions and so on. I feel this is a real age of building alternatives to the old powerless political system. It won't happen overnight, but it's really a follow your passion moment that can be replicated globally very fast.
Yeah, and that's great, because I totally agree. And I think that that idea of not just fractals, but quantum fractals, where we are entangled through language, through meaning making, and so that there is this kind of and that goes into, you were talking about like the quality of agency, but how it it creates these self-similar patterns at all scales. So the individual is the collective, it is the global, and that you're affecting, you know, you have these like effects at all scales. And I think that often we just feel so small, like, oh, I do this and it's really not going to matter at the systems level, or it's not going to, I can't overthrow a government, I can't do this or that. But when you actually start to see that when you stand up for those values that, as Monica has mentioned, that you actually do, you know, you're creating that space that others can step into. And so it's really, you know, it's like that shift. And I think that's what appeals to me with all the emerging literature on quantum social science. And I feel it's that, you know, collectively we're just underestimating our capacity for social change by just thinking in this very classic individualist way and reducing ourselves to just these very homo economicus, as you put in your presentation. And yeah, so I think it's a really great starting point. And I wonder if, Leonie, if any other questions are coming in, and we can take that and take this discussion further. So thanks.
Yeah, we've got a lot of good questions. We haven't got a lot of time, so one question from ECOS community. Sometimes I've heard agency defined as being like efficacy or ability to act, and that there's individual personal agency, but also collective and proxy, which can all be misused, right? So that gets into the quality of agency. So Monica, are you able to address that?
Yeah, for me, we have token representation worldwide. No, we do not have the essence of that agency the way Indra and the way Karen have been describing. So when we open the floor, it's vital that it's based on non-negotiable universal values that exist in every single culture. And that is equity, that is dignity, and that's different from cultural norms. Cultural norms can be life enhancing, they can be life diminishing, and we don't have time to go there. But to me, agency in the way I work is a space that I stand up and I do not, I'm able to speak truth to power based on those values rather than a space in a non-polarizing way rather than a space. So we've seen this unfold worldwide. And so to me, that agency will, as Karen put it, underpinned by a true oneness with nature or people, not a mushy oneness, but an essence of who I am as humanity, the essence of me. That's the space to go. And to have rigor in strategy. Otherwise it becomes just, it's like for the moment, it's not enduring, it's not equitable.
Thank you.
That's how I see it. And there's more in the book about it, actually.
Yes. Yeah.
The book, Radical Transformational Leadership.
Yes.
And yeah, there are examples of agency. There are 100 examples of agency in that book.
A question, I think maybe for Indra. It was addressed to Monica, but I'd like to ask Indra from Alvin. Following on from Karen's question about domination and inequalities, how can we decolonize global governance, and especially climate and ocean governance? I mean, do you
Sorry, I don't mean to laugh. I don't mean to laugh. It's just it's a huge question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that the sometimes the powerlessness that an ordinary citizen might feel is because they can't imagine that they would have an impact upon such a big question. And so that's why I was really appreciating, maybe Karen would like to answer that question, but really appreciating about how the sense of overwhelm or the sense of not being able to take any action at all has to come back to, where does my personal agency lie? Do I feel as if I'm connected to agency itself, or to power itself? And that has to be tested, if you like, within the boundaries of your own life. If we get too lost in a theory of change or the possibility of change, but we're not really testing our own agency in the place that we live or in the relationships that we have, then it will be difficult for us to believe that it's possible to go beyond that.
A question I've been thinking myself is, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the relationship between courage and agency. Maybe Monica.
Okay. So everything everyone's asking is so valid. So to me, courage is different from bravery in the way we work. So courage comes from the Latin word cur, which is a broken heart. When I can break open my heart of universal love, not the mushy mushy one, then I am able to serve. And then I go back to the next point that Karen raised. So we use several methods. One is we need to demystify this space if we want a people's movement. We cannot have too much theory. Now, it has to be, as Indra said, the practice of change, not just the theory. Frankly, that's where people move. The second is, fractal for me is very simple. It's a fractal that holds who I am as universal values, how I think to create alternatives, and what I do. Because whenever I work with people, they say, but I'm so small, the problem is so big. I said, but that's the wrong question. The question is not the problem is so big. The question is, do I know how to design to make a difference? Because today's systems and structures have been designed by people. Do I know how to design that alternative? So then that's the fractal that can take us to scale. Good news, 10% said Xi of any entity moves, the rest move. So.
Thank you.
I love that. And if I could just add that one of the great, unlearning that we have to do is this idea that that as an individual, there's a choice between being an individualist and a socialist or a globalist. That you have to choose which realm you want to move in. But every single human being has all three realms within them. Every one of us can think personally. Every one of us needs to be thinking socially, but every one of us is capable of thinking of the global realm. And as Monica says, we can be designing that from where we are. We don't have to go there, so to speak, to do it. So this concept of the cosmo-local is very key, is very important to us designing on the ground, that we should bring the global into the local and the personal all the time. That's really essential to our agency.
Thank you.
Lovely.
Karen, would you like to hear from our other guest speakers?
Yeah, well, actually, we're going to start to bring it down to everybody participating here into what does agency actually mean for you? And I just wanted to get a few reflections. For example, what does agency mean to an artist? And we're very fortunate to have Tone Bjørdam here participating, and she did the artwork for the book, and we heard about that last time. And we've talked a lot together in our conversations about the, kind of the difference between the scientist and the artist, and also the commonalities between them. So Tone, if you are in around, if you could just share a few minutes about what does agency mean to an artist, or through your perspective.
Yes, so one thing is what drives me as an artist, which for me is to investigate different sides of the wonder of nature, to channel that through art, and then to share that experience with others. Another thing is that there are many ways for artists when it comes to reaching an audience. One of them is to actively seek opportunities by achieving important contacts and to apply for exhibitions. I do that sometimes, but I tend to work in a more intuitive way by waiting for opportunities to occur and to go for the ones that seems most appealing at the time. So there is a clear connection between the playful and intuitive way I work when I produce art and the way I reach an audience. I also don't measure success in how many people I reach, but in how happy I am with the result. I like the freedom in that my work often reach people just by chance. And I trust that sometimes the art might reach people that really needs to experience it.
Yes, thank you, Tone. That's beautiful. And I think you really get to that essence or the quality of agency, because sometimes we think we have to have agency and exert agency, and really, and that is part of that problem versus actually a certain way of being and having, you know, having that kind of grounded agency that's in who you are, as we've heard about. August Alstead is a student at the Norwegian University of Life Sciences, and I asked him, he's interested in basically avoiding extinction and enabling the evolution of society and flourishing for all life on the planet. And August, are you there? Because I would love to hear what agency means to young people today.
Hey, yeah, I am here. I don't know how many young people share my reflections, but I will share what comes up. Like a central piece that comes up for me is the connection between agency and choice making and sense making. So kind of agency, if agency is your ability to kind of act in the world and have influence outwards, in order to be an effective agent and not just a dangerous tool, you obviously need a symmetrical good capacity for choice, for making good choices, which again is informed by the capacity for good sense making, actually being able to sense what is going on in the world, make meaning of it, and see what affordances, what choices that opens up, and also having the capacity to make good choices that is not just good for yourself, but for the kind of whole of life. Which I guess brings us back to the, I think a thing that both Monica and several of you brought up, like being able to kind of connect to the whole of life and kind of cultivate that capacity. So yeah, I think that's kind of the most central thing that comes up for me, and actually taking personal responsibility for cultivating those capacities, both for making good sense of the world, making good choices, and cultivating your agency and realizing that that is kind of a developmental process.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, August. I should mention that we met after a Vipassana meditation course after 9 days of silence, and then we started talking about these big issues. So yeah, so hopefully I think your view probably resonates with many young people today. And finally, Andrew Becker, who is the director of Integral Without Borders and leads a development project called Grace Cares in Guatemala. Andrew, if you're on, could you tell us a little bit about what agency means in the context of development?
Yeah, thank you, Karen. Thanks, everyone. I'm resonating a lot with what everyone is sharing here, and I'll actually say, so this concept of agency is something that I really leaned into and discovered in a new way in the transformational leadership course that we did in Oslo with Monica, and it's been a really powerful framing, and I also resonate so much with Indra's talk of storytelling and the power of storytelling, and so kind of just to be brief about it, in the realm of development, there, and Indra mentions this as well, that there seems to be this dynamic of big, powerful institution shows up in a community with the solutions and says, here you go, you're welcome, right? It's kind of this imposition of the solution on the community with this idea that, oh, yes, we're here helping you. And that really takes the agency away from the community that you're there to support. And so what might be a new story for development work? What might be a new story of what's actually happening when you're going to support a community? And so in Guatemala, kind of, and this story has been for me as I've discovered my agency, it's not the agency of going and doing change. It's not the agency of showing up and changing people, changing the community. It's the agency of being able to give voice and facilitate inquiry and exploration in the communities that I'm in. So the very first thing that we do when we work in Guatemala with indigenous Mayan women, and they very much don't have a strong sense of agency. So much so that when one of the first things we do is ask, what are your goals in life? Why are you doing what you're doing? It's like, oh, like for many of them, it's a question they've never really considered. No one's really asked them, what are you trying to achieve in your life? It's been very much, I wake up, I get my allowance from my husband, I go to the market, I buy the food for the family, I come back, I cook the food, I maintain the house. And it's kind of this sense of life is just happening to me. It's not so much that I'm changing the world, I'm changing my life, I'm changing my situation. It's, oh, well, these are the cards I was dealt, and I guess that's that. And so just by entering and saying, what are you trying to achieve? What are your goals? Why do you do what you do? Is it opens up an entire window into, oh, wait, I can imagine a future. I can think of something that I would like to achieve for myself and for my family. And then with that, we focus it around, in the community finance program, around the management of money and then basically the creation of an alternative banking system. Mm-hmm. It's recognizing that the current banking system is not serving their needs. They don't really understand how the loans work. They don't have access to low interest loans. And so it's through the exploration of how are you currently managing money? How are you trying to achieve your goals in life? And then how can we together build what we call savings groups or informal credit unions, where you are running your own community bank that is yours to build and create. And then the last thing I'll share is the part of the fractals is such an interesting story of what's actually happening. It seems so small, right? It's just, oh, just a group of women having their own little community bank. But then that gets replicated, and that's what we're seeing in this program, is everyone is starting to see that there is this whole other possibility, and that pattern gets repeated and can be scaled up, which is incredibly powerful.
Oh, thank you so much, Andrew. That is like kind of that individual and collective unfolding that we've been hearing about. So, Leonie, do you?
Yeah, so now we're going to split into breakout rooms, and I'll just, we'll be there for 10 minutes, and I'm just going to post, if you could introduce yourselves, and I'm posting 2 questions in the chat that it would, if you'd like to consider as a group, and we might have time to share insights when we come out of the breakout rooms. So,
do you want to read the questions out loud now, just so that we can?
Sure. Sorry, number 1, how does agency show up in the area you work in? And number 2, how can we amplify individual and collective agency in constructive ways? So I will put you into groups now, and I'll stay in touch via the chat. Okay, see you soon. Welcome back, everybody. Karen, have we got you on the line?
Yep, I'm here.
Yeah. We have time for a comment or 2 if anyone would like to share an insight or reflect on something that happened in their group. You can use the raise hand function, and any further questions or?
So there were a lot of really good questions, Leonie, and we didn't get to answer all of them, unfortunately, but I saw one.
2 people with their hands up.
Oh, great.
Yeah, go ahead, Jessica.
Thank you so much, Leonie, and thanks so much, Karen and Monica and Indra for your really special contributions. I was just really struck in our group. We had a very disjointed conversation. I was with Danielle, and then we had two people joining us, Karen and Siri or Sunny. I can't Sini, sorry. And I was in the tiny disruptive little conversation we had. Nonetheless, I was really struck by how all of us were coming at agency from such different places and different perspectives. And when I first started learning about the idea of agency, it was very much about this idea of individuals and how individuals drive change. But my kind of big takeaway, I think, from all of this discussion is how very much distributed, webbed, meshed, interconnected agency is and should be and can be. In so many different levels, dimensions, ways. Yeah, so I just want to appreciate and acknowledge that takeaway from the little discussion and from everybody's contribution. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Karina has her hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to say we had 5 in our group and we didn't get to amplify the second, except that I feel like we're already there. We were already embodying it, because we had 2 people in the 5 that came through me, but it was in very magical ways, like cosmic ways. And I would not have found you, Karen, had not I been looking for a quote from William Irwin Thompson that I had posted. And I didn't find what I had posted, I found what someone else had posted. I commented on it and he said, hey, you would love to be on Agency Matters. So we're already amplifying. I just want to say that.
Thanks, Karina. Thanks. Uta, would you like to say a few words?
Okay, thank you. And is it okay if I say something that is not directly related to the breakout room?
Maybe, yes.
It's just something that goes around in my head a lot, because I moved to the US, and I don't know if there are any people who live in the US, but I find the polarization in this country like extreme and very upsetting. And like, if I look at Agency Matters and what we talk about, I feel that all of us might have a political tendency towards one side of the spectrum. And I wonder how we can make this a dialogue that is not a liberal progressive movement dialogue, but that also gives voice to people. Like, if it's about making people heard and giving them political power, somehow the people that are feeding all those isms, there's deeply something bothering them. So in some way, how can we integrate these 2 parts of the society again, even if we believe that a lot of hatred is going on, you know? And like, I just wonder, I'm very careful about not letting this become again a liberal progressive thing that's going to be trashed and excluded from other people that don't believe in these things yet.
Monica, would you like to respond?
I think it would be great if both Monica and Indra could respond, because it's exactly what they're working on.
Yeah. You're muted. Hold on, we'll just... Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Indra, and then I'll jump in.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it's interesting. It's a great question, and thanks for raising it. I would say we're doing exactly that by focusing on agency. And in fact, that in the divide that we experienced in the UK, it was between the leavers and the remainers. And you might say that the leavers were easily, lumped into the same category as the Trump supporters in the US. But in fact, these are the very people that we are working mostly with, because our sense was that unless we work with people, the vast majority of people, then no matter what great liberal idea is offered in the future, will be sabotaged anyway by people who aren't being reached by these ideas. So in fact, looking at a human being as having needs, emotional needs, step straight into that space. And the campaign that the Leave campaign was built on this idea of taking back control. And you know, we would say absolutely necessary. It's true that every human being has a need for control of their circumstances. And so instead of rejecting that as an idea or calling it populism, we work with it and we ask, how can everybody, you know, develop their sense of control? It's essential to their agency. So I think you're right, Uta, completely. But I would say that is, you know, in a way, this focus on agency is a response to the most people. It's a human response as opposed to an old political one.
So I'd like to begin where a fellow practitioner, Karen, the young gentleman who spoke, the youth leader.
August, yeah.
August, wonderful, yes. He brought up choice. So in the US, I find a very limited understanding of the word freedom. And there's a mix-up between, like they'll say, wearing a mask stops my freedom. Freedom for me is a profound state. In India, we would call it mukti, liberation from bias, liberation from attachment, liberation from opinion. And so to me, freedom is what we work on, the deepest at which human beings can engage with, and then look at choice from that space. And so for me, what I find working in the US, and I do work a lot in Oakland with people who are engaged in this movement, the big issue for me is how do we hold Black Lives Matter and create a post-privilege world with any ism? It's not one, you see, it's not, that's the entry point. And in our work, and it's in the book, about how people have transcended the polarity between white supremacy and Black Lives Matter, etc. Why am I bringing this up? Because the outside media, like to you, is very disturbing for me. And it's just polarizing, you know, our spaces. And what I know is we can use specific tools that transcend polarized conversations of us, them. And so how can values, and George Lakoff wrote about this, values transcend, universal values transcend parties. And we need to be able to generate language and stories in a profound way that build on what Andrew was saying, you know, like from that space. So for me, this confusion about freedom, that I need freedom to own a gun, for example, as if that's freedom. It's a choice. And to me, this thing about preference, choice, and freedom, and license, like you have a driving license, I have the license to kill, like James Bond. So we've unleashed these kinds of stories that is freedom. And to me, till we can move freedom, mukti way, we are going to have these polarized conversations. So much of our work in addressing racism or casteism in India has to do with that. Thank you for bringing that up, because to me, it's very, you know, the inability to use language to transcend polarity in our stories, in the way we talk to each other every day.
Mm. Thank you, Monica. And thank you, Indra. I might flip to Karen just to see, Karen, would you like to say any last words before we...
No, I'm looking through the comments, and it's just fascinating, all the different types of sharing, and it's probably a good segue into Ann Pender talking about the Quantum Leap Initiative, because I think that, like, you know, people say, like, this stuff is happening and it's going on, and there's so many great examples around the world that just kind of feed into what we're actually talking about here. So is Ann available?
Anne's curating the You Matter More Than You Think webpage, which is part of the Quantum Leap initiative that accompanies the book. So, Anne, would you like to briefly talk about that?
I will talk very briefly because my internet connection is very poor and I could drop at any moment. basically, the Quantum Leap Initiative is looking to grow the message of Karen's book and to help people activate their sense of agency and become these fractals for quantum social change. Initially, we're doing it through the website, which is youmattermorethanyoutthink.com, and through these webinars. And we really want to try and become a focal point for this concept of quantum social change, which a lot of people are actually working with and on already, like Indra and Monica and Andrew and many others. So we want to bring people together so that they can know other people are working on this, exchange ideas, and become the practice of their own. We're also using the website to explore some of the concepts in the book a little bit in more detail, and we have various pages about what matters. Foundations matter, the basic scientific concepts that we're dealing with when in Karen's book. Things like art and literature matter. How are these concepts expressed in different ways? We're also looking at giving examples, because that's what everybody wants to hear, and it's been so wonderful seeing all of the comments and chat in the chat box today and examples that people are able to share. We have a page called Agency Matters, where we're highlighting just a few examples and really interested in hearing more, so please feel free to let us know what you have and what you would like to share in that regard. We've just this week put a new page up called Practice Matters, where we're starting to just feed some tangible ways that people can practice embodying quantum social change through connections, through entanglement, through actually doing dialogue, to actually do, how do we do this in our daily lives? And that was one of the themes from tonight, I think, is we need to start where we are right now, and how can we practice that? So we're really looking to provide some more information so people can explore the concept in more detail, to bring people together and to really share the examples of how this is already working. So please do check out the website. Hopefully you'll be interested in coming to participating in some of our future seminars. We are doing this on a self-funded basis at the moment, so if anybody is interested in supporting the work, we would be more than well delighted to hear from you. But really, we want to engage. We want to engage with people. We want people to engage with us, and so that we can really grow this and bring people who are working on this together and become that focal point for letting it out into the world.
Thanks, Anne. Thank you very much. So we're sort of moving into the conclusion, and I'd really love to thank our guests today, Monica Sharma and Indra, August and Andrew and Tona and Karen, of course, and everyone for joining us. If you haven't already, I'd encourage you to download Karen's draft for discussion of the book on the website, which I posted above. We've had some great comments and questions. It's really fantastic. And you can follow the Quantum Leap Initiative, as Anne said, by subscribing to the mailing list. We didn't get to all of the great questions today, but we do take them down and we do look at them, and we are incorporating them into revisions of the book. So if you have extra questions, you can email them through to me. And I also wanted to say that you can provide feedback on the book as well by the 31st of August. So we're running regular webinars, and so the next one will be on the 17th of September on time matters, and we'll be sending out the link to this recording in the coming days. So thank you for joining us. Karen, do you want to just finish up with a reflection?
Yeah, no, I'm just reading all the things that come in and about different mindfulness and Nora Bateson and things, and that's exactly, like, I really welcome, we welcome like all the different like cognate fields that are going on, but also you know, critical feedback, because that's how we improve. And I'm really looking forward to just going to submit it for publication after this round of revisions. And in the next webinar, we're going to talk about like what I think was the most challenging is like time matters, and like from that quantum sense of, backward causation and, past and future not working. Like I think it's essential, but it also will be related to, we're in the decade that matters, and we have so little time really to address so many big issues. And I think that what we're really trying to say is that if we address one, we address all of them, because it really is about that relationship between us and others and where we draw those lines, like kind of what Ute was talking about, the polarization, us versus them, and how we relate to the future, how we relate to other generations and things. So I'm really excited to go through the comments and follow up on the links and everything, and look forward to seeing you in September, and we'll be looking at the comments and then seeing whether we can bring any of those in and just keep the conversation going. So thank you so much, and thank you Indra and Monica for joining us, and thank you everybody for joining and staying and participating. And thank you Leonie for being such a wonderful guide for this.
Okay,
thank you. Thank you so much.
Goodbye.
Thank you so much for this incredible opportunity, Karen. Your book is a game changer.
Oh, thank you.